Hello, my name is Steven Barhorst, and you are watching Straight Talk. Hello, and welcome to a more casual Straight Talk. My name is Steven Barhorst, joined by JP Remages and Charlie Convery. Now, at the top of the show, we would like to talk about the Syrian civil war and the Syrian chemical attacks. Now, I believe it was a few weeks ago at the time of taping this, there was another chemical weapons attack by the dictator of Syria, President Bashar al-Assad. It was sarin gas and a few other chemicals, and they were deployed, I believe it was outside of Aleppo, and we all know the horrible, horrible pictures and the horrible ramifications of chemical weapons and WMDs. Now, President Trump, in response to this, he declared a red line of his own, and he actually went out and there were ramifications for the crossing of this red line. He shot 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian air base where the chemical attacks supposedly came out of. This was all while he was at a dinner and a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and supposedly this was while they were at dinner or while President Xi was sleeping. Yeah, it's been a lot of this, and a lot of Trump's base is actually leaving him. There's a big internal conflict between the Trumpians and the alt-right to figure out what exactly is going on. Charlie, we will start with you for this.
I think it's very interesting to see that the Syrian government is resorting to chemical weapons again, because we thought that it was just kind of a one-time thing back in 2013, I believe. But I actually am happy with the actions that the United States took. I think that even though we have been conducting bombing raids on ISIS, I think that we do need to start handling the situation itself. And I'm actually happy with the action President Trump took in launching the 59 missiles. 6 Syrians were killed, but there is an issue since the Syrian government is pretty much openly working with the Russian government, that they were allowed a half-hour warning to evacuate the base. So it didn't really stop much except for eliminate the airfield. So if there are more chemical weapons, they may have time to move them or redeploy them somewhere else, so that could be an issue. We also saw further ramifications actually in the Security Council. There was a huge argument between the Russian diplomat, the United States diplomat, and the diplomat who represents the Syrian government currently sitting on the Security Council as a guest. They actually had an open argument exchange, which is rarely seen in the Security Council. So to see how much kind of chaos this is starting to cause is really interesting to see Syria really heating back up again.
Yeah, I saw Representative Nikki Haley from the United States. The delegate from Bolivia actually requested a closed session of the Security Council, and I have, of all of President Trump's nominees and all of his decisions of who to appoint, Nikki Haley has been a home run in my book. I have loved everything she's done so far, and her statement in response to the Bolivian delegate wanting a closed session, she denied it because I can't remember what she's chairing specifically this month, but the United States is
they're the head of the Security Council.
They're head of the Security Council for the month or whatever the period of time is. And she said if anybody wants to defend the actions taken by the Assad government in Syria, then they're going to have to do it in front of the public eye. And I just love that so much, because she has been nothing but, she's like another Iron Lady in the Security Council and just in the United Nations in general for the United States. And I agree with you. I think that the fact that you don't really, the irony here is that I haven't heard that much, drawback from the Democratic side. It's been from, like you said, from Trump's base.
Which is
so it's almost like a flip of the script that has, happened in the time since we've had the health care bill, which we'll get to in a little bit. And now you see all these people. I haven't heard a Democrat come out and necessarily say I support President Trump's actions, but I at the same time haven't heard them say I oppose President Trump's actions, which is so, one and the same, I guess. Not condemning it is essentially supporting it. But I think that, and another thing I saw was that I think a list of countries that condemned the United States missile attack was like Russia, I believe China was on the list. It's all the countries that, Iran. It makes you really wonder, if, can you claim to be a civilized country in an attempt to have international relations with, and obviously they don't all, want to have international relations with the West, but at the very least, having conversations internationally while condemning a response to a chemical weapons attack.
Right.
That is mind-boggling to me.
Well, Russia and Iran also came out after a condemnation saying that if the United States takes action again against the Syrian government, that they will take action in their own ways, which is interesting that it's now becoming, if it wasn't already, a proxy war just between Russia and their allies versus the United States and our allies, and that it'd be interesting to see what actions the Russians and the Iranians would take, because Iran is already funding the Assad regime, and Russia has actually already attacked by accident locations that are known rebel bases who the U.S. are funding. So it's kind of like we're going back into a Cold War proxy situation between Russia and the United
I feel
States.
like this type of response from President Trump is almost a testament to how he has, in a way, developed since he's become the president of the United States. You heard a lot of very strong, almost non-negotiable rhetoric on the campaign trail, but since he's taken office, you've seen him not only take more reasonable, at least in this situation, it is evident that he's taking a little bit more reasonable military actions and at least listening to his advisors, taking into account all the information at his disposal. But you've also seen him back off of things like his tariff policy that he was, basically just pounding down the throats of everybody on the campaign trail. Maybe, again, listening to his advisors thinking, well, basic economics tells you that a tariff is not a good thing, so let's not do that. So I'd like to think that this response, he didn't do anything boneheaded. He took what many military advisors see as a very reasonable, very strategic course of action, which is comforting to me as somebody who wanted to root for his success, but has, he's made it very difficult to do so at many times throughout his first couple of months as president. So I hope we can see more of this sort of reeled in, thoughtful president as opposed to the one who has made some asinine remarks and has kind of shot himself in the foot a lot.
Well, to shift focus back to the sort of internal struggle that was brought up between Trump's base, a lot of this has to do with accusations that it was a false flag, that either this was perpetrated by rebel groups which are given supplies and funded by ISIS, or some of the more hardcore ones have cited the deep state as one of the potential perpetrators. And it's really kind of driven a divide down it, where it used to be this sort of unified front. A lot of them talked about like a cult of personality almost, where it was, okay, well, the president would do something and we would just be in favor of it altogether. And you've really kind of seen this sort of bubbling up of all of the different divides between it. I was wondering if any of you guys had any thoughts on that.
I mean, I've always sort of taken issue with people that just blindly oh, Trump did that, I love it. Don't even really bother to think about the ramifications or what it'll entail. It's almost like a reality check for him. Because it's, genuinely, I mean, I tend to support the Republican Party, you tend to support the Democratic Party, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that the Republicans do or the Democrats do, that either one of us are going to support all the time. It's just it doesn't happen like that in politics unless you're, very tunnel vision, closed-minded point of view. So it is a really big eye-opener, I think, for a lot of his base, and seeing well, not only that, but and you had mentioned before we started the show, he basically ran in being an isolationist type of candidate. And that's back to my point of saying he's developed. You can't be an isolationist in this day and age. It's just not going to work. Whether you're talking about military, diplomacy, trade, any of the above, you're not going to be successful in the 21st century world if you're going to be an isolationist.
I mean, already 2 months in, he's taken action in the Middle East, and we saw with NAFTA that he's keeping a large majority of the clauses. So it seems like the isolationist attitude is starting to develop into something else, something I feel that is much better and more required for this day and age of globalism, is that you need to stay involved in the international community. But on terms of the false flag accusations, I see it more through a fake news aspect, which really bugs me, because I already hate the idea of fake news and how rampant it's become, but now to the point where things are being confirmed by governments and it's coming out as like a public statement, and yet even Trump's own base is refusing to believe it and saying, no, that's the deep state, those are the rebels. And with even Trump's party and the United States taking action against it, which I actually am in favor of, they are now going against it. So I think it's going to be a very interesting
And I even
setup.
saw like an article or a headline on MSNBC and to some degree had some sort of thing saying like there is a Trump-Putin relationship worth exploring in regards to the Syrian issue. And I'm just like, you got, like, you can, all of the Trump-Putin, like, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, aside, to say that the President of the United States is in some respect maybe tied to the chemical weapons attack in Syria, even to me as like a very, very, very mild supporter of President Trump, that is just bananas to me. Like, is not all, and what basically got me through this whole like transition process is like there are advisors, there are checks and balances. We have a system in place that works. I have a very hard time believing that the military advisors, the generals, everyone in the Department of Defense would let that happen.
They're all scheming
Plus,
against.
that would be like the most impeachable of all impeachable offenses.
I mean, it's a right-out war crime. Like,
so
it's just,
I mean,
I think it's absurd.
I agree with you on the fact that I mean, it's almost difficult to watch the news anymore because I'm sort of thinking to myself, well, like, what do I believe anymore? Like, can I watch this and then have it be a reputable source?
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah. Well, to shift topics now to the Obamacare replacement, or what would have been. It was shot down after, I believe, Paul Ryan and the House Republicans forced a vote on it. There's been all sorts of speculations on both sides, where some people like Bill O'Reilly have pointed out where the bill just because we're dedicated for our work here at Straight Talk, this is a portion of the bill. It's pretty long, and some people like Bill O'Reilly have pointed out that the bill that was offered to Congress was not anything near what the final bill was going to look like. So if they had just sent it out to the Senate and then they had just deliberated it, it would have been changed and it would have been taken from something like this. It would have been something different. Others have said that just the entire concept of the bill is not something that they could get behind because in the bill it amends it. It doesn't repeal it, which is what a lot of more conservative Republicans like Rand Paul and like Ted Cruz and like Mike Lee, Thomas Massie, Justin Amash, all those aside, they wanted to see a repeal, not necessarily a soft amendment, which is what they ended up getting. But of course, it was shot down, and now Trump pseudo gave up on it. He said that they were just going to go on to taxes. They were going to do that. And that strategy has even, gotten under fire because a lot of the budgetary process, like it was billed that the House, the health care, proposal needed to get through because then they could find out how much money they would need to allocate towards health care, and then they would go through with the budget. And now that Obamacare is basically kept in place, that a lot of the budgetary committee is going to be really, strained to figure out how they're going to do all this while still leaving open the chance that Obamacare could still be replaced, repealed, or even amended into the future. Charlie, what do you think?
Well, I feel like the bill was pretty DOA. It was pretty dead on arrival from the moment it was like publicly announced.
The rollout was very bad.
It got attacked from every angle, from Republicans, Democrats, healthcare specialists, large hospital companies. No one seemed on board with it. And I like how it was almost, I saw a lot of comments that it was like Obamacare light, how it took out a lot of the major parts of Obamacare, but left some interesting parts that most of the Republican Party didn't agree with.
Yeah.
I also feel like that the Republican Party and those trying to still repeal and replace Obamacare have kind of lost their way. I think they were so focused on repealing and replacing that they forgot kind of what actually needs to happen, that they need to lower the cost of the insurance, they need to incentivize the youth and those who are sick to roll into the plan, and I feel like this really just dropped the ball on all those aspects, and they really need to go back and redraft and go back to why they want to repeal and replace or amend the actual Affordable Care Act, and that they need to reevaluate their plan of action.
The issue I took with the bill isn't even necessarily with the content. I mean, to a degree, yes. To me, it's with, like you said, the rollout of it, how the bill and its downfall happened. It wasn't even really at the disposal of the Democrats. It was the Trumpians, the Freedom Caucusers. It was the very, very conservative people who said, and this is I've taken issue with this since from day one of his presidency. When you get to, seeing people on Twitter, people on the news saying, it's been 2 weeks. Why do we still have why don't we have an Obamacare repeal yet? And because Trump obviously famously said, I'm going to repeal it on day one. And any reasonable person can say, like, yes, I might disagree with the policies in Obamacare. It might be failing, but it would nonetheless, a straight repeal, not simultaneous with a replacement or an amendment, would dramatically sweep healthcare out from under the feet of millions of Americans, which nobody should want if you're a reasonable person. So that, to me, is why the bill failed. You have the people saying, I won't settle for anything less than a full repeal. People like Rand Paul, you mentioned Obamacare Light. To me, Obamacare Light is code for, partisanship.
Yeah.
I'm not going to listen to what the other side's proposing. I'm not going to listen to ideas that aren't my own. Because you even saw the Freedom Caucusers late in the process when you saw Paul Ryan and Republican leaders saying, like, what can we do to get you on board with this? They would make an effort, and then they'd say, now I want this. I want more. They don't understand the process of negotiating a bill. And you would think they did because they're members of Congress, but I guess not. It just, to me, speaks to the entire Washington agenda, the entire atmosphere around it, because obviously you have people like Bernie Sanders saying, Democrats should take a very, large amounts of pride in the fact that this bill failed, and, Nancy Pelosi saying this is, a big victory for the Democrats, and to a degree it is. I mean, the bill failed, and for the Democrats that is a victory for them, but it wasn't. My point is that it wasn't really their doing. It was the Republicans killing themselves in this whole process. And another thing I take issue with in this process is, and I guess this is myself being a more moderate conservative and a realist, saying I would have rather have them take the time, put together a sound piece of legislation, something that would work, and take your time to do it. If it comes 2 or 3 months down the road, fine. I'd rather have them do that than put together a piece of, just something to get it on the table out in the first month of his presidency and say, look, we did it, we have a bill, and then everyone saying basically, like, that's it? Like, this is what you've been running on for the last 8 years, and this is what we get? Now, and again, I'm not a healthcare expert myself. I didn't dive all that deep into the bill, but from what it seems like, there were definitely areas to be improved upon. So, and then, the one thing that people did always bring up was the agency that, for the congressional agency that, projected, I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but they were the same organization that they said that, this bill would be, not good, but they also said that Obamacare would work to perfection. So 8 years ago. So it's a give and a take. Nothing, you can't really predict it to a T. And then that goes back to the whole idea of, fake news. It's like, what can I believe nowadays? This entire process, I found myself looking at, left-wing news sources, right-wing news sources, every single news source, just so I can hear what the left is saying, the right's saying, the middle's saying, just so I can kind of hear different arguments and say, well, which one sounds reasonable? Which one sounds like it's, the most straightforward? And it's just,
one of the things I thought was really interesting with the bill was how Trump seemed to kind of distance himself from it near the later stage, and that this was by no means like Trump care, as some people started to call it. Like I don't feel was involved very much at all in drafting this bill, and he was the one who pulled it before it went to Congress, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he also didn't seem that into it. I watched like a press interview where he kind of just glanced off talking about the bill, and he kind of left it to the rest of the Republican Party to seem to handle it. And I feel like that really saved some skin on him. I mean, if he really tried to push it and was really behind it and was like, the nickname was Trump Care and all these things, I feel like it really would have taken another huge hit to him.
And it puzzles me too. I'm just have internally been trying to figure out like what the speaker's role in it was, because it seemed very unlike him to put forward something like this that got attacked from every which way, because he has long been known as one of the more intelligent, thoughtful members of Congress, who was just like one of somebody I know that works in Washington has said, he's so smart that when he talks, a lot of people just kind of zone out because they don't understand to the degree of what he's saying. And he's been like a prominent conservative member of the House for the entire 21st century, since he joined Congress in I think the late 90s. It just seems out of character for him to lead and put forward a bill like this. So I'm just trying to figure out what role. Obviously, I mean, being the Speaker of the House, the leader of the Republican Party in Congress, he had to have a major role in writing it.
I feel like he was
but I feel
pressured
like
a lot to
he was
push it
pressured
quickly.
by the right, and he was pressured by a lot of just everybody to come. I think that this was an effort from the Republican Party to get a bill that Democrats would support, because, like you said, they left a good deal of Obamacare policies in the bill, and I think that was a failed attempt at bipartisanship, only because, and I think that, bipartisanship in this term, it's not really going to work, because, and you've seen this also with the thing we're going to get to in a bit, the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch as Supreme Court Justice. If you attach Donald Trump's name to something, it could be the most reasonable policy known to mankind. I still think that it would get voted down by the Democrats, because just because it's got Trump's name attached to it, I think anything, plus not to mention the fact that Obamacare was the staple of Obama's presidency and the progressive agenda for the last 8 years. I don't think they were ever going to have success in getting bipartisan support for it, much like Neil Gorsuch. And I think I only heard of maybe one or two Democrats vote for Neil Gorsuch in their in his confirmation hearing. So,
well, if I can interject, just as someone who's read, I've read the bill. I've spent a good amount of time with it. Just going off of what you said earlier about Paul Ryan, it also kind of strikes me as odd too, because there's a lot of entitlements left in it from Obamacare, and Paul Ryan,
big on entitlements.
he's historically been very anti-entitlements. Like, regardless of what you personally think about the issue, Paul Ryan does not like entitlements, and a lot of them are left over. A lot of them are left over in the bill. Just another thing about it, a lot of the bill doesn't even really do like a whole lot of like adding and subtracting. It's just, we're going to move semicolons here and we're going to move commas there, and we're going to do a lot of things. They added a few things about lottery winnings and how they could take that if they needed to cover for health care, but that's going too much into it. I know that going off of the Obamacare is going to be repealed on day one, and a lot of the promises that President Trump made on the campaign trail that he was going to do it day one. There are people, hardcore Trumpists and the people in the alt-right who are still lamenting the fact that the wall is not being built, and we're already 2 months in.
It's only been 2 months, so
it
feels a lot longer.
Well, so the bill was seen by a lot as if, when Paul Ryan finally unveiled the bill, he said that this is the closest we're going to get to repealing Obamacare. Like in this current climate, with the way that the Democrats are, we're going to, this is the closest we're going to get to repealing
Which,
it.
again, I think serves to the fact that he legitimately, in the Republican leadership, thought this is something that the Democrats might
Well, yeah, he got behind it. But a lot of pundits, I remember the Blazes, Glenn Beck, and Ben Shapiro, just to name two of the more high-profile conservatives who had issue with this, they were saying, well, hold on, we have the House, we have the Senate, and we have the White House, and Trump's just going to sign off on it to fulfill campaign promises. So I don't buy that, they didn't buy that this was the best they could do. As far as why it was like this, some have speculated that Trump on healthcare, his two big promises were, we're going to repeal Obamacare and we're going to get rid of the state lines, so that healthcare providers can go across the state lines and they can compete across the country. But some had speculated that he's a little bit more left-leaning on healthcare than many thought. So I wanted to know if you guys had any thoughts on that, or if we'll move on.
I mean, I think that it's interesting that, like you said, the Republicans didn't just go straight out with a totally conservative approach, because having lived in the state of Illinois for our entire lives, I mean, I assume, or at the very least, most of our lives, Mike Madigan and the Democrats have had if not a majority, a super majority. Then Republicans just won back some seats, but they have had total control of Illinois government up until the election of Bruce Browner for a very long time. And that is proof that you do not need the support of the opposing party to push your agenda. The Democrats, when they had the supermajority, they could literally propose anything they wanted, not get a single Republican vote. Even if Governor Browner had vetoed it, they had veto-proof majority. Literally, they could do anything that they wanted.
Yeah.
So if you control every branch, for lack of a better term, every house, and you have the White House, you don't need a Democratic vote for a lot of these things. And it's interesting to me that they tried for that more moderate approach. It almost, whether you not want to say that that's a phony effort of being bipartisan, or if it's just sheer ignorance, who knows? But that's another, question mark at the start of this legislative term.
I don't know. I never looked at it as such a bipartisan act.
I really haven't.
It's interesting to see it that way. But if they really wanted just to kind of go, since they have a majority, they could have just not at all tried for any bipartisanship and could have just tried to push it. But I think because they might have, rather through just ignorance of not understanding or trying to be bipartisan, they lost most of their own base.
It could have been an effort
it fell on itself.
Could have been an effort to get something, because if they basically repealed Obamacare and put forward the Republican version of Obamacare, like a very conservative approach, then the next time the Democrats got the House or the Senate or the White House, it would just be like a sign. It's like the nuclear option. Yeah. Basically, the next time the Democrats have something they want to get passed and they have control, they'll do nuclear. It's just a ping pong match. So and I guess that's a lot of what politics are in government nowadays is, but it's total chaos.
Well, I'm hoping that through the ping pong we'll eventually just find a nice
ball. The ball will just
it'll just roll into place. Yeah. Well, you brought up the nuclear option. I think that is the perfect segue to the next topic. We're going to be talking about the confirmation of now Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch was of course Donald Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, and after a lot of deliberation, I believe there was a few memos sent out by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, basically threatening Democrats who voted for Gorsuch, saying, "You better not vote for him, or we're going to get you come 2018."
It's the old mafia.
Yeah, so there was a lot of back and forth with that, and when it didn't look like they would have the 60 votes to get it, in just a normal Senate vote, and it looked like the Democrats were going to filibuster this. Mitch McConnell, who a lot of people were really questioning if he was actually going to do it, because there's been a lot of the major criticism of Mitch McConnell is that he doesn't really have too much of a backbone, and he'll just kind of let the Democrats just have their way in the Senate, even when they had the majority. Well, Mitch McConnell activated the nuclear option, which means that instead of a 60-vote majority, all you needed was a simple majority, which basically guaranteed that the Republicans were going to get it. And on top of that, you could not filibuster. So with that, Neil Gorsuch became, I believe it was Assistant Justice? Associate Justice. And a lot of the big criticism from that stems off of, I remember there was a hashtag on Twitter, it was trending, I think it was stolen seat, where the big thing was it was Obama had nominated Merrick Garland, and that did not really get so far. So a few Democratic operatives and more even on the left have this whole, well, they propose that Merrick Garland essentially had his seat stolen from him. I can't really speak to that, but JP, would you like to get us started?
I mean, in regards to the aspect of a stolen seat, I too have seen things online of tweets, statements, whatever you want to say. I will never look at Neil Gorsuch as a legitimate justice of the Supreme Court, and you shouldn't either. And statements like that. I will agree with you that whomever. I will agree that Merrick Garland was not necessarily treated fairly in the aspect that the idea of the Senate confirming a Supreme Court justice, and the issue that I took with the Republican approach to it was, you don't have to want to vote for him. You don't have to confirm him. All you have to do is give him a vote. If you're the Republicans and you have a majority in the House, all you have to do is give him a vote, and then he'll get denied. If you have a majority and you're confident that you'll get more no's than yeses, and maybe that's the issue. Maybe they thought that Merrick Garland was too moderate of a candidate, that some Republicans would go the other way. But I have a hard time believing that, considering the climate and the gridlock that we have right now. And I think that this is the same thing that happened as we saw Gorsuch's confirmation being delayed. To me, Neil Gorsuch is basically the Republican Merrick Garland in a sense, because I saw very few things. I obviously had very different political perspectives than Merrick Garland did, but I mean, you've seen in the past justices confirmed almost unanimously in a lot of different situations.
Well, Gorsuch was confirmed unanimously to
when
a
he
federal
was
judgeship.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the Supreme Court is a whole other animal, but if you would, Neil Gorsuch, to me, if you're a Democrat, similarly to what liberal analysts had said about Merrick Garland, if you're a Republican, you should want that Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. Just because Obama could have appointed somebody much more liberal. Yeah. Neil Gorsuch, to me, is highly qualified, obviously. He's highly respected. And one thing that I was impressed with when I was watching some of his confirmation hearings is that he refused to answer any political questions. He didn't get, I think it was Senator Al Franken repeatedly asked him, he said, do you think that Merrick Garland was treated fairly in his confirmation process? And Gorsuch replied, I don't get into political matters. And Al Franken was like, well, you have been, since you were a teenager, involved in political campaigns. And he's like, well, Senator, since I've become a justice 10 years ago, I have not commented on political issues. And to me, it was refreshing to see somebody in that capacity saying, look, this is not why I'm here. If you were here to question my character, if you're here to question my, my past, give me questions that are relevant to my confirmation as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, not trying to get the gotcha questions. So I think it's a shame that they had to invoke the nuclear option, because I think in any other climate he could have been approved with a 60 majority, but that's just unfortunately the world that we're living in.
Yeah. I don't think that Garland got his seat stolen.
Yeah.
But I do think that the Republicans should have probably done their job in confirming Garland, as he is pretty moderate. I mean, Obama could have tried pushing for someone far more liberal, and Garland was a pretty good moderate candidate that I think everyone could have been happy with. But the Republicans, they played their cards well and that they waited. But I think that then spawns the attitude, like you said, of them. The Democrats can just simply do that next election if they do get a majority or if they get the White House. And I think though Gorsuch is a good candidate and he is more than qualified, I don't think he is the candidate for this political atmosphere. As we've seen, it is extremely gridlocked. Trump's approval rating is at 36%. It's the lowest of any sitting president. And to push a Republican, though
be
he,
fair,
though
is
he is
there
not,
a candidate for this political climate begs the question.
I mean,
There really
I
isn't
think
at
that
this
he
point.
could have chosen a more moderate candidate in actually not, though he recommended Gorsuch on his campaign trail, I think he could have reevaluated looking at the political scene going on and perhaps gone for a more moderate candidate. Though Gorsuch is not a radical conservative by any means, and though he is very qualified, I think that a moderate would have been very refreshing in such a gridlocked attitude Washington at this point. I am very happy, though, that we do have a full Supreme Court again. After months of waiting, I am happy that that's filled. But I think that the Republicans shouldn't have had to try, or they shouldn't have had to force the nuclear option. I think it adds more polarization to what is already a ridiculous circumstance.
There's been a very good case, and JP, you kind of laid it out, where the political climate was such that if the only person that Donald Trump could have nominated that would have made the Democrats happy would have been Merrick Garland, and even if he did, some Democrats would have probably taken a step back, like, oh, Donald Trump, Donald Trump sent you out. Well, maybe I have to reevaluate you if he thinks that you're going to be a good justice.
That's an interesting point.
So the political climate, in this area is such that I don't really know who could have done it.
It's like I said earlier with the the health care bill. I don't think simply by attaching Trump's name to something, it gives many liberal a sour taste in their mouth. And going back to Merrick Garland, I wouldn't, if the Republicans chose to vote no on him, I wouldn't have had a problem with that. It's nowhere. It's the constitutional duty of the Senate to confirm the justices, but in no way does it say they are forced to vote for a singular candidate.
Waiting for the next election.
I mean, I would agree that my point is that I think that they could have just put him up for a vote and voted no, and then it would have been done. All you would have done, and that alone probably would have taken 2 to 3 months, and then at that point, Obama probably would have had 4 months left of his presidency, and at that point, I don't think you can get another nominee up for the Supreme Court.
I think they at least should have voted.
They at least should have put him up for a vote. I don't think anybody. Well, there are people that'll deny that, but most people in the middle area of the political spectrum will agree that probably could have been done.
And even then, as you said, when if that timeline happened during that stretch in the election, Hillary was still the favorite to win.
Well, she was always the favorite to win.
Up to the actual day and when it closed, she was the favorite. So if Obama does do that and Merrick Garland gets shot down, he's probably just thinking to himself, well, I don't really have to do anything. Hillary is just going to nominate someone.
I think it
so
also
then we're probably right where we are now.
To a degree, I think the only reason, well, there's many reasons, but I think one of the reasons that Republicans, that I don't think they'll admit it, but I think one reason that they waited is because if Hillary won the election, I think they might have put him up for a vote in November and then voted yes.
Yeah.
Because they put all their chips in the middle for Trump. I wouldn't. That in and of itself, I never saw him being the nominee, and let alone when he was. I never saw him winning. I don't think most people didn't see him winning. So for the Republican leadership in the Senate to place their faith that he would win and then they would get their Neil Gorsuch candidate, that takes a lot of risk.
Or maybe it was just a last middle finger to Obama saying, no, we're going to wait for whoever the next president is.
It's definitely both, but if Hillary had won, there is a minimal chance in my mind that she would have nominated anybody as moderate or more moderate than Neil Gorsuch. I think she would have just gone full out take that. Here's a Elizabeth Warren-esque Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. Well, that seems as good a spot as any to end it. My name is Steven Barhorst, JP Remages, and Charlie Convery. This has been Straight Talk. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time.